Tally became a household name even before SaaS was mainstream in India. Very few brands evoke as much legacy and impact as Tally. Today on the Create Wealth podcast, I'm excited to have Tejas and Nupur Goenka, the third generation of the family behind Tally. Founded back in the mid 80s as a simple tool for bookkeeping, Tally is now used by over 2.5 million businesses to manage their finances and accounts. Building for MSMEs, adapting to the GST revolution, and expanding into new territories, Tejas and Nupur have been steering Tally through India's digital transformation. I'm super excited to uncover the journey of building India's only family-owned SaaS company. I'm Sandeep Jethwani, your host and co-founder at Deserve. The most fascinating thing about Tally has been that it's a family-owned Indian software company. On the way to this podcast, I was telling you earlier, I was trying to think of which other companies are like this, and I couldn't think of a single other one, right? How did Tally come to be? How did a Marwadi family decide to get into the software business?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, we're a very atypical Marwadi family in that sense. So the family moved from Calcutta back in '69. And when we moved to Bangalore, we were in debt running a small, sick manufacturing business. And dad was fascinated with computers. So somehow coaxed my granddad to get one. And those were like 2 lakh rupees, 3 lakh rupee type of computers.
Back then, that was hugely expensive.
Huge. And it made no sense because salaries, were 8,000, 6,000. But somehow he got it. And one fortunate day, now that we look back, the entire factory had actually burnt down. So in the meantime, my granddad had given dad a project कि अगर तुमको कंप्यूटर पे इतना इंटरेस्ट है तो कुछ यूजफुल बना दो. And he didn't like any of the products that were out there. So he was like, make something that I can use. And honestly, that's how the journey started. The only thing in that burnt factory that was left was, as legend goes, the computer somehow. And that's been the start of Tally.
On that one, I think the interesting part is that in the time that this product was being sold, a lot of people wouldn't have the tooling to use the product. Like computers weren't around, so whom would you sell to, right?
Yeah.
And the TAM would be very, very small, right? So how was the whole sales motion, or today what they call GTM?
Yeah.
How was that in the time that Tally started rolling out software?
Oh, great stories.
Very door to door. Honestly, a lot of our sales still is door to door, regardless of how ridiculous that is to believe. But some of the stories in Calcutta, on the tokeries, a computer used to be transported to the place where my granddad would go and do a demo. So he has really, honestly, traveled the length and the breadth of the country. So many customers that we meet in various cities have said that I remember when when your granddad came to meet and sell the product. So whether it's Kolhapur, whether it's Jabalpur, whether it's Indore, it doesn't matter. This was way back then. I don't know if there are any other stories that sort of stand out.
I think there are many customers I remember who've also said like they bought a computer to use Tally at that point in time. So once they saw the magic of Tally, that's when they decided, okay, let me invest in. And it was very expensive, but.
Yeah. And I guess just to add in, like the computer would cost you, a lakh and a half.
Yeah.
Product would cost you 10,000 bucks at that time.
10,000 bucks, or?
10,000 rupees for one license.
One license, okay.
For one license. And so you can't really position that as automation helping save you.
Yeah.
It had to be sold on sex appeal. Like it had to be sold on your ability to use it, your delight to use it, your forward thinkingness. And if we didn't sell on that, how would you replace an accountant who's doing the job at 6,000-7,000 bucks?
Yeah.
But
after having purchased the product, would people renew it or continue using it? Because, one thing is this sex appeal, the excitement of something new, but then life takes over. You still have that accountant, you're still paying a salary. In Indian businesses, you don't fire your accountant so easily, right? So how would the renewal rates or the continuity of the product, because that will then go to referrals eventually, right?
Perfect. thing with SMEs are that SMEs are 100% owner driven. Decisions are taken by the owner and the business runs the way the business needs to run. Which means that no matter what logic, software, structure you sort of put in, the software has to adapt to you, not the other way around. You can never expect the business owner to modify their relationship with their suppliers just because the software is bringing in a best practice. And because that principle was built in, your ability to be able to use the software later on was significantly better. In most cases, software trends are like, you'll start using it and then most entry starts staying out of the system.
Correct. So retention curves are very weak.
Very weak. So the basis of building the product had to be that you will keep using. The second thing that from a design principle of the product is what we internally call incremental implementation.
Okay.
So which means that you may buy me for one thing, but your business will grow, your business will evolve. You paid me 10,000 bucks from, let's say, Jabalpur. There's no way I can take a train back and come to service you again. So if you want to grow, you should be able to do it yourself. So the patterns that the software would use were like 5 or 6 patterns. And any feature you wanted to implement could be done on day 1 or day 100 or day 5,000. It wouldn't matter per se.
Yeah. The fascinating thing here was that to me, this was founder-led sales before it was a thing, right? And how do you then replicate it? How do you teach everyone in the sales team to be able to sell in that way where you're, selling the sex appeal? Because it's one thing to sell the product features. It's another thing to say, okay, look, this is so good, you'll get ahead in life and all of that emotion around it. How did your father train the team members to be able to do that?
Yeah, honestly, it's been hard. It's not been so easy. I mean, both of us still struggle with it today. So Dadaji had a few folks that he had built out, spent a lot of time with. He would make sure from a tactical perspective, every evening he would talk to everyone who was selling. Because also in sales, you hear a lot of no's, right? Yeah. So you need to get it off your chest. The next day you have to be charged up. I think that tactic is something that I think has stuck to me at least. It's not that I do it, but that seemed valuable. Second was that even today, 100% of our sales are partner-led. In a market like India, we've got people, you can pretty much name a city, name a town, someone there sells and services the product. Sure. So it's a very reach-out oriented, ground-oriented effort in that sense. And he would sit with every single person who at that point were mostly customers who loved the product so much that they wanted to sell it. So we had a partner in Calcutta, for example. They run a jute business even today, but they also sell Tally. And the Mr. and Mrs. Desai. So he would spend inordinate amount of time with them just to make sure that they got the pitch correct. He would make sure that when they would visit new things in the product, he would test them on. So that passion sort of transferred, but it was very, very sort of handcrafted. And I think once you do that, that sort of core group of folks, are able to maybe then replicate. But it's honestly not scientific.
But so much of this seems so similar to what great SaaS companies world over have done, right? Where the founder first rolls up their sleeves and gets into the thick of the action, trying to figure how to sell it. And then the team adopts to those kind of ways of selling, right? The other part is this whole customer love that, Tally gets and used to get even in the past. So much of this crafting would be around unique to Indian situation, right? Built for India back in the day when computers were not there, internet was not there, power supply was an issue. Getting the computer to this location in itself is a challenge. So how was the family thinking about scale at that point? How was like the process of like product development even done?
So for the first 15 years, I think, if I'm not wrong, Dad was the only one who would build the product. He was the only engineer in the company. That's it.
Yeah.
He would code himself and he would design it himself.
Until date, honestly, the thing that he loves is that. That's his calling in life and very, very passionate about it. But a few things that have stood out and still stand with us. We're one of those few companies, that end up building a lot of technology ourselves. So we are probably a handful in the world that have our own database, that do our own math, have our own language on which we write the application actually. So there's a lot of deep work that
I cannot
happens.
even believe like you have your own coding language what's it called? Like what do you
TDL,
Tally definition language, yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's like in the family clearly. Did you like study TDL before you studied Hindi or something?
So yeah, I mean, building for India is, I think, a completely different game. And I also think in retrospect, it's an incredibly blessed place that we are in today. Because we don't fear building technology. We are not by default saying, let's use an existing communication protocol or existing security methods. And it allows us to dream a lot bigger, a lot more uniquely than for most others, where technology becomes the constraint. So a lot of the conversations that happen in our new next effort that we're building out is how many bits and bytes can we shave off. So in an ID, there'll be 16 bits. No, can we make it 14 or can we make it 13 or can we make it 12? What does each bit stand for? So there's a level of performance engineering that sort of sets in. There's a level of reliability engineering that sets in. And I think that that's happened because of the environment back then. And that, I would say, was driven by a bold, I can say bold, that point maybe sounding a little more arrogant statement, ki at that point only two types of businesses, my granddad said, would exist. Those that use Tally and those that will use Tally.
I love it. Yeah.
So that now sets your thought process. Here we sabko karna hai, So how do you now get to people in Nepal sitting in Bangalore or Tinsukia sitting in Bangalore? And you have to build for that first time sale, product love, and never needing to ever go back there.
Yeah. I think that's why even in the Middle East right now, with the journey that we've had, 5 to 6 out of 10 softwares that are sold are Tally.
Yeah.
As our second largest, lion's share market.
What is fascinating is this whole like the frugality of how you build this out, because you're talking about reducing the number of bits. You're not taking an external constraint that in the coding language this is how it is done, so we'll adapt the product to that. You're saying, let me build the language or the entire journey in-house so that we are not constrained by any of these externalities. The whole thing about the competitive environment, because Tally scaled, and then there was suddenly this influx of what then became SaaS, funded by a lot of venture capital. And then on the other hand, there's this family-run business, which is very much about, I'm sure, unit economics, etc. How did that play out when this whole explosion of this venture-funded ecosystem happened?
It's a solid question. To be honest, Sandeep, in the 90s, there was competition. We were not the first people. We've remained not the last, but we've remained one of the few that's kind of stood the test of time.
We only remember Tally, but there were others at that time.
Many.
Always.
In the 2000s, we had some of the big guys come in. Microsoft, Sage, they came in. In the last decade, we had this wave of both well-funded folks, as well as folks from outside that are seeing India as a 65 million entrepreneur base, large market and so on. I think what we've realized is that it's not so much, while commercials do matter, in software, one of the things goes back to what we were talking about. Can I use it? And ye chalega ki nahi chalega? So it's not easy to be, till date, in many cases, when people who are too big for Tally decide to move on to something else, they struggle for several quarters actually to get a balanced trial balance, which is mind-blowing in a company like us.
It's 101.
Is 101. So I think that that's really helped. It's not like we've gone right all the time, but obviously we've been right more than we've been wrong. So I do think that that's the determining factor is how well the product really works. How well can it sustain for the company? I think those things matter a lot more. For example, we value privacy a lot more than many others do. We believe that data of the customer is the customer's right and the customer's secret in that sense. So a lot of the security stuff that we build out, not a single engineer inside Tally can even take a look at it. And it's by design. It's not for any other reason, right?
So you don't know who's making how much money?
Zero idea.
No idea.
And thank God we have zero idea. But those things help us.
Yeah. I think, so we have a 10-day induction program whenever somebody enters the company. And it's reasonably long for anybody to just spend zero work, 10 days, full days, complete immersion in learning about the company. And inevitably, I think people ask or make the statement during induction that Tally in the 90s, in the early 2000s, obviously had the first mover advantage. And Dad has always perpetually responded to that, exactly to Tejas's point that we were never first. We have perpetually late 80s, early 90s, 2000s, we've never not had competition inside the market. And the question we've asked ourselves, and I think is important to keep asking, is how do you acknowledge competition and still figure out how to create what it means to create the best product possible?
And it's not easy to live it on a daily basis,
Absolutely.
right? Like I'm sure you look over your shoulder every once in a while and say, okay, this competitor is doing this, should we think about it, and so on. And that has
100%.
influence. Did you ever think about raising external capital?
Keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
We keep, I mean, honestly, it's never been a no for us. There's no taboo. There's no, in that sense, worry. But we keep debating it either in a car ride or a flight, or once in a while it'll come up as a subject. For sure.
But one of the perpetual conversations we had with Dad as well, we had with Tejas also, was should we think about external funding? Because you can really bring a lot of expertise that Tally does not have today in that field, to make something big happen. So we wound up never doing it. But I think the question also came to above and beyond capital, what is the value that you can bring to the table?
And is the question that we don't need this capital? Or is the question that we will give up some bit of control?
I mean, I would go back to her point. So for us, both of us dream about serving every entrepreneur globally. Like if we can build an Indian company that can serve entrepreneurs globally, that would be amazing. And that, I guess, gets us going every day. I think if we're able to bring that journey, make it happen faster, make it happen bigger, expand our ambition even, I think we love to see that value. It's not so much about the money per se, because I think from a family perspective, we're not opulent, it's not a big thing. We're not desirous of it either from a money perspective. So we'd love to see something happen. We'd love to see if we can get folks that can help us grow outside.
Sure. Along the way, there would be like inflection points that happen in any business. And sometimes outside in people think of it as overnight successes, but there is some real work happening. Like, for instance, for wealth management, implementation of GST was a big thing, right? Because suddenly all of this money, which was off books, came on books, and then financialization happened. So our scope of servicing SME owners really expanded after 2016-17. And I think something similar would have happened in case of Tally also.
Yeah.
But at that point, there's more competition that comes in. There is more like user expectations that rise. How do you like turn the course of the business or shift business gears at that point of time?
Yeah, I can talk about 3 inflection points maybe. One was back in the mid-90s, we launched a product called 4.5. That was the make or break of Tally. That honestly made Tally what it is today. It was our most famous product. Many customers still talk to us about, oh my God, do you remember those days? And that was totally internally driven.
And what was different about 4.5?
Believe it or not, it was flawless.
There are customers today that still use 4.5, that still remember like more than 2 decades later.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's, I mean, the kind of complaints that would come in were, your title is 3 pixels off the center. So it was very, very good. Extremely quick, very fast. It set a performance benchmark that was hard to beat. That was one. We had another one in the mid 2000s when sales tax became VAT. That was another big compliance push. We were never into compliance before that. Then we started doing compliance once VAT came in. And the third big inflection point was, of course, GST. The day it got announced, I remember this. I was in Kochi. I was traveling back from Kochi, and Arun Jaitley was on the television screen. And I'd walked into the airport, and it said GST is now being passed, or something like that, passed in Rajya Sabha or something. So I called Dad up and said, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable. We have to do something." The next day, we called everyone up from the offices into the cafeteria and said, "All hands on deck." I think those inflection points require the full force of the company to be behind it. We were doing, I think we've done events, and we've physically met almost 10 lakh people to just educate on GST. The only thing that was, from a brand perspective, that was there was the Tally logo, small Tally logo on a slide deck, and an example of how GST worked with a company called Ratna Steel. So we did events, 5,000 people events, just explaining how GST would impact businesses and their lives.
It makes sense, I think it looks like you're serving probably the toughest, most value conscious, demanding customer segment. And therefore, whatever it takes to go deep and deliver it, I think is important. I want to switch gears to the family side of things now. And what I find fascinating is that there's a common operating system on the back of which both the family and the business are running together, right? Like, how do you ensure that you don't take stuff back home? How do you handle disagreements at office, and then do you fight about them at home as well? Like, how does that work?
We don't not take things home. There's enough conversation, dinner time, breakfast time, gym time, that is about Tally. But I think the way we look at conflict is great. I think it's a little scary if either of us has an idea, if there's an idea inside the company that everybody automatically agrees with. And it's not about conflict between two people. I think it's about figuring out how to build a great idea and kind of breaking the idea itself in order to keep remolding it. I think that's the perspective of conflict that I feel we both have built over a period of time, as opposed to, brother, sister fighting against each other, and then whose idea is it?
So honestly, what happened was, in a car ride back in 2019, Dad was like, "I'm done now. Now you all take over."
We got 2 weeks of time.
Yeah, so mid-March, and he's like, "1st April, now I'm signing over everything." The first 2 years, almost 2.5 years, was very tough for us to find like a working style, working rhythm that would work.
Yeah.
I'd come from a place where I had been doing this for a long time. She had come from a place where she just started doing this now for some time. My dynamic, her energy style, everything was different.
Since we were kids.
Yeah. And I think that we had very deep personal conversations over the first 2 years to get to a place where I can't go a day without calling her like 5 times a day. And it need not just be about work, but now we know we're in that same rhythm. So it did take a lot of work, if you ask me. It's not easy.
The other big thing that you guys have advantage is the kind of vantage point you have on what's happening in the economy, because you probably know who's buying software, who's not. When you're meeting customers, you know which industries are doing well or not. How has that influenced your portfolio decisions? Like, how do you invest? Where do you invest?
Yeah. So traditionally, I mean, to be honest, a lot of our money has remained in the company. So we are capital preservers, treasury, usual stuff.
So that's like conservative, fixed income.
Very conservative, more fixed income, becoming more long-termy, but that's the general nature of it. Personally, we've been trying to build our portfolios. It does give us a lot more flexibility. So we have some, of course, reasonable amount of it allocated towards more traditional things, more debt equity, some split, some risk level, something. But there's also some interesting fun stuff that we do on the side. So I do, from my side, we have a not small, but an early stage energy focused venture fund called Transition VC. So I'm participating in that, learning a whole lot more than I ever thought I would. Not sure what I'm doing there, but honestly, it's been an incredible journey.
What's Transition VC about? Like you said, energy focused. What do you really do?
So we invest in battery technology, heat saving, energies, all the energy transition related stuff is a lot of what we do. So it's
all your capital or other people's money?
Other people's as well. So yeah, so we've been raising a bit of, it's going actually really well. So 2-3 investments we've made till now. The fundraise should close in the next few weeks, next few months maybe.
How big is the fund?
About 200 crores with an additional 200 green shoe. Option. Yeah.
Amazing. So you're becoming a wealth manager. We'll talk about that separately. Nupur and Tejas, this has been very interesting for me. I grew up hearing about Tally. Dad was a chartered accountant and he was working for a bank. So I remember this time when they used to say that send me your Tally report before they would lend to that company. So it was like common language in a sense, and it's amazing to see how the company got built very differently. It's also incredible to see the family dynamic behind the company. Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you, Sandeep. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.